Hey everyone, my name is Lester Martin. I'm from Starburst. I'm a developer advocate here, and welcome to this webinar today. The title is called Icehouse 101. It's a hands-on webinar. Hopefully, you got an email from me yesterday, unless you maybe signed up late or something. And that email, just to make a quick point before I get too far along, would have included a PDF, and that PDF is called Icehouse Lab. I want you to make sure you have this. If you don't have that in the session itself, under chat, you can toggle between chat and docs, and there should be a list, an item there that says, hey, here's the doc, here's the lab guide. You can grab it like that. I'm only going to point it out because in my email, I really said, hey, before you show up, if you can, pretty much on the page 3 through 7, we had some screenshots. If you're planning on doing the labs with me live today, it would be beneficial to maybe while I'm doing some intro to go ahead and do this first few steps because I'm going to gloss over it when I get there. It's to create a Starburst Galaxy account if you don't have one already. It's just going to simply drop you somewhere. It's going to ask first name, last name, pretty much an email address, and you're off to the races. All right, so I want to make sure you had a chance to know about that ahead of time. Something we will be looking at here in just a few minutes. Again, if you're planning on reviewing with me live, consider going and set that up because it will help you out. Move along. If you're watching it yourself now and you want to do the labs later, great. Don't worry about it. If you're watching this in a playback later in the future, take a pause. Maybe go ahead and just listen in. We'll have an opportunity when we get there and talk about it. You can take a pause and then set everything up to get you going. All right, so let's jump back in. Icehouse 101, Lester Martin. There's my email address. Another email address is devrel@starburst.io. If I get a minute, I'll try to put that in the chat. So Icehouse, I think everyone that's here that's registered probably has heard about Apache Iceberg already. Apache Iceberg. So that's fair enough. And chances are, if you registered with us, you've heard about Trino by now. But those two together, those two projects, Apache Iceberg and open source Trino, put together is what our CEO here at Starburst coined the phrase the Icehouse. It's a data lake house with these two major technologies. And what are we trying to give? We try to give you that data lake experience with the warehouse benefits and features all together in one. And this is a really powerful combination. Now, maybe another term, if we just lighten up and say maybe not just the Icehouse, but just say holistically what's going on here, and we'll just use the phrase data lake house or an open data lake house. Absolutely, some of this should be review, and if it's not, that's okay. It's simply saying that we're going to separate storage and compute in a modern architecture today. Of course, we're going to use some kind of storage. We're indicating public cloud bucket there. And then, of course, file formats that we've all known about, heard about over years, beyond things like JSON and CSV. So basically, generally speaking, columnar file formats like Parquet and Orc. And then there's this notion of table formats. Iceberg is a table format. So if Iceberg is still kind of new to you, I think early on people confused table formats with file formats. Table formats leverage file formats. Table formats are really about the metadata itself. And then, how do we store that? How rich is it? Where does it live? And then what can we do with it? What benefits can we do with that beyond there? Some of those are like ACID transactions, time travel, things like that. So we mentioned separate storage and compute. So you see kind of the blue being a storage element there. And then, of course, now we kind of transition to those Trino colors there. And then this is part of the Icehouse architecture, compute engines, Trino. Obviously, when you start talking about Iceberg, we have a lot of optionality there as well. So other compute engines could interact with that. So it's not like building this with Trino is preventing you to do other activities in some other manner. It's obviously the preferred SQL engine that we are promoting here. And then a benefit of Trino, Starburst built on top of Trino, is that the rest of the things that exist out there, my hunch is, not every piece of data you have today or tomorrow is in Apache Iceberg. There are going to be plenty of things that are in other frameworks. Sure, the data lake frameworks, but there are very likely plenty of things in other technologies, relational databases, EDWs, NoSQL systems, message queues, search engines, third-party apps, so on, so on, so on. So we want to make sure we absolutely include that world as well, and allowing concepts like federated querying across that. So joining data sets that live in lots of places together in a single query. So the open data lakehouse. And of course, we're going to wrap all the good stuff, all the security, box and RBox, and all the lineage that you expect from governance as well. All those things, all the authentication options, and then just those authorization options we were talking about as well. And I'll show you some of those things today. The lab guide covers going through that security, governance, lineage, so on, so on, so forth. So if you take a minute and simply say why, and up in the upper corner there's Icehouse Open Lakehouse. I think that's probably the quintessential little discussion about this notion of Icehouse. I think it's fair to say I usually just kind of look at this slide and think of the bottom up. I mentioned it when I showed those visuals a minute ago. Trino is a very optionality-oriented SQL engine, meaning we can talk to all kinds of things. You don't have to move things around if you don't need to or don't want to yet or just can't. And the reality is below that, at the compute layer, if you use things like Iceberg, you also have massive amounts of optionality. You can further slice it and go within each one of those and say there are choices and options all the way through. So very open. Nothing you're doing here are going to get you bound into something crazy. You pay Starburst, which is Trino Plus. You're still using, Apache Iceberg. You're still going to leverage that benefit. Should you want to move away? Should you want to use other systems simultaneously? All that good stuff. SQL based, of course, as we work up the stack there. Absolutely, this has to be not just scalable, but performance at scale. In fact, that's why that's why Iceberg came along. Good folks over there at Netflix saw some concerns, had some concerns about Apache Hive. So think of Hive as another table format, or the initial original table format. Think of Iceberg, maybe dealt in some others as additional table formats that work differently how they handle metadata. So it's got to scale like crazy. It's got to perform at scale. Absolutely. And then, of course, we're going to make sure everything here, it says compatibility from the start. I mentioned Netflix is building this. What you really see is that Netflix was using Trino as they were constructing, building, and creating, and then starting to leverage it internally, what we see today as a modern Apache Iceberg as well. So we've always been at the foreground of all that good stuff. Now, when you think about an Icehouse, well, we said, it's Trino plus Iceberg. Well, likely you probably have to look at a larger set of problems. And that's why we started laying things around there like governance and security and stuff. And you might even need more than that. You need how do I get data? How do I get it in? How to land it? Is it coming from a streaming system? Is it files, et cetera? Lots of kind of opportunities. Or other data systems? Absolutely. When we're going to learn today that these Apache Iceberg does require some maintenance activities. There are things that we have to do to make sure those tables continue to perform and scale and don't cause us issues and concerns. So those activities there. And why not try to find ways to automate that? So I'll show you some of that. And then, of course, you want to make sure the system's constantly right-sized. You want to, either by yourself or by using some additional piece of software. I think of Starburst and Enterprise, Starburst Galaxy as ones that really can help with this capacity management, scaling up and scaling down as appropriate. So we'll see some of those things. We'll talk a little bit about data ingestion as well. There are some additional features that we have, live table features that work with Kafka, that work with object stores to pull that information, map it, and auto just load that stuff that we won't go through today. Other webinars can tackle that. So if you think of those as kind of high-level requirements, then the architectures themselves likely become an alphabet soup of a variety of technologies, and they get pretty complicated in a hurry. And that's not necessarily bad. That's just the reality we live in. But the truth is, these systems, these architectures look pretty much the same at 20,000 feet. 10,000 feet, 5,000 feet and lower, names start filling in workflow concepts and ideas. Orchestration tools get selected, messaging platforms, object storages, that kind of stuff, streaming systems. And the reality is they aren't all that different from what they're trying to do and how they're attacking the problem, but they do offer all kinds of options and pluggable models in there. So they're complicated, they're not very differentiating themselves, and one would argue, if possible, maybe just benefit, from one of these that already exists that you can use. Because if you have to build your own, again, if they're non-differentiating, they're complicated, there you go. You're going to miss your goals. You're spending a lot more money and time and effort and resources than you were hoping to do to get that benefit when they already exist. And in fact, I work for Starburst, the number one contributor to Trino, and absolutely, I'm going to plug Starburst Galaxy, our software as a service offering, our Trino in the cloud, where we take care of all the management of those activities. Obviously, we have other frameworks, Starburst Enterprise, we have the Dell appliance, and then we're really all at heart, we're still talking about open source Trino. It's just that some of these additional things, automated data management, you kind of see on the bottom here, additional things beyond just basic, Kubernetes, scale up, scale down, additional things you can do via controls and visualizations of those controls to tackle that. And then, of course, those bookends, you see there, hey, where am I getting data from? And then how am I making sure it's secure, it's governed, it gets, reporting, all that kind of important stuff, tagging, etc. Those are things that are above just core Trino, things that you could build yourself. But again, back to that point of, do you want to build it or do you want to take advantage of the benefit of it? And I would argue, personally, you want to take advantage of those concepts at the cheapest price with the right combination of performance, security, all those things. All right, enough of that sales job there. And there we go, some additional customers that have been comfortable saying some things about us. I think we have many more. You can come to our public website, connect with us on LinkedIn. We constantly like to share information and stories that we publish, that others publish about us as well, to keep current. All right, that's the end of my slideware. If I look at my time slot, I think I burned about 12 minutes on that. I was shooting for 10 or less, so I went a little long. What I want to do now is swing over to the lab guide. And I want to make a quick point that for those that did take a few minutes to do this already, just now or prior today, or previously set up Starburst Galaxy, ultimately going to get to see something like this, Starburst Galaxy, kind of massive homepage, and then more appropriately, we'll do a lot of our work right here in the query editor. So I want you to see something before we got any further. All right, there's Starburst Galaxy. We're gonna do most of our activities in. All right, what I'm gonna do now is give myself a little room. I'm gonna adjust my screens a little bit here. I'm gonna take a moment though, make sure. The questions. I don't see anything. All right, Monica's in the background. Another important person here for us. And I shouldn't have checked the chat because Monica will keep me honest if I need to look at it really hard here. All right, so if I look into this lab guide, this is the one you have, either now, live with me, or after the fact watching. And all the instructions are here are going to work just fine whenever you do this. The only real problem you're going to have is that we do let you set up read-write access to an S3 bucket. So there are some credentials in here that are short-lived. They're only going to make it about 7 days. So they're going to expire about this time next week. I think I'd list the exact time further down in the lab guide. So if you're watching this after the fact, realize you probably need to reach out and talk to someone. What's a good place to reach out? Hopefully it'll go in the chat, devrel@starburst.io. There's my personal email also in this PDF that you're welcome to look at. All right, so what are we going to do? We're going to make sure we got Starburst Galaxy up and running. We're going to connect to a catalog. Just a second, I'll show you our use case. But in our use case, really what we're going to do is connect to some raw data. We're going to build a medallion architecture. We'll evolve that raw or bronze information to something more business agreeable and consistent. Call that a silver layer. Then we'll build what our requirements is. Second, will tell us are the requirements for a consume or a gold layer. And we'll build that out, and then we'll go a little further and use some additional products, additional Starburst magic above Trino. We'll do some creating dev data products. We'll look at tagging. We'll look at some security and see how those things fit together. Search, tagging, security, lineage. I'll make sure to show you those visual lineage activities as well. All right. So let's get on in here. What's the lab about? What's the use case about? Well, we have this fictional bank, the Burst Bank Regional Bank that exists out there. And what it's going to say is, hey, we got some of this login information. So it might be hard to see, so I'll go a little wider here. We have some information that's living out in AWS, and it's only just a couple days in March just to give us a flair for the information. And really what it is web login activity. It's going to say, hey, this person or this customer around this time from this location, this kind of device did something. Generally speaking, we're talking about logins, and we're going to say how many attempts did it take, and what was the final answer? Did they get in? Did they get it? Did they get in or not? So a bunch of records over and over. You'll see that they're in JSON, as you see there. And I could go to AWS, but I'll just show a screenshot to say, hey, this stuff already lives in a particular location that's further identified in the lab guide. And it's already being pre-partitioned. It's already being, whoever's creating this and dropping this in AWS has put folders that actually are going to help us real nice when we build a table. They're going to, oh, okay, we'll probably have a field called login date. We're doing a partition at that day level. So it's already been pre-separated for us. All right. All right, and so if I look a little harder, that's what we're describing down here in this picture at the bottom. And I'm gonna go really wide just because the picture will look a little better. This is a little bigger here. So that web login actions lives out in Amazon S3 bucket. Now what we're gonna do is pull that in. We're gonna use our schema discovery tool to look at that and go, I can build a table for you. I'll take care of that for you. And that'll count for our bronze layer. Then we're gonna look at the notion of a silver layer. Silver layer, again, what are we gonna do? We're just gonna clean, enrich, standardize, put some rigor around data types, all that kind of good stuff. This data will be in pretty good shape already just to keep the process moving forward, but that's what we would normally do. Sometimes we enrich or augment there in the silver layer, but in our particular business, we decided those events still make sense. And then ultimately, we're going to build some tables. We're going to build a table that's going to be a much more fine-grained specifics that we're looking for. We're going to throw a bunch of things out that we know are just not important to us, and we're going to include joining some lookup information. So we have our bank kind of master data out there, customers and profiles and all that good stuff. So we'll enrich those web login data with actual customer information as well. And then we'll run with that. We'll query on that, but then we'll go forward and talk about data products and security and all that kind of good stuff. All right, that's the general gist that we're going to tackle there. And as I mentioned earlier at the very beginning, page 3 through 7 is 3 through 7 is really about setting up Starburst Galaxy. As you saw earlier, if I click on that link, it's just going to take me to a form, first name, last name, email. You're in. No credit card, nothing like that. So I'm going to just look at these screenshots because I've already set this up. That's going to send you a little email, a confirmation code, that confirmation code and a link. You'll click on that. You'll enter the code. And then it's really going to say, hey, pick a domain. Now, my domain is Lester Dodd, Galaxy Starburst IO. Monica, at this one, she did this screenshot. It was Monica Miller for you'll put something. Obviously, it'll make sure it fits and all that good stuff. Make it your name. Make it something that means something to you or a cute handle that you like. And then go ahead and set a password for that. And you're off and running. At the end of that, what you've created is an account, a basic account that's also in a role called account admin. And this, you'll have this little notion of account admin in the upper right-hand corner, suggesting that's the current role that you're sitting in. More than likely, unless the setup has changed a little bit, you might be asked a question or two. Much of this you can probably just walk away from, but definitely just if you got a second, just simply say, hey, training or something like that. And then it's going to say, hey, want to go through our wizard and all that stuff? You can, so that's interesting to you. But for the most part, if you just close it out, you will be where? You'll be over here in the SQL editor. In fact, you'll have a tab open. You'll have a query that's valid or running against some sample data and so on, so on, and so forth. So if you want to just validate it all's working, go ahead and try to run that query. All right, so that's stuff you're going to have to do yourself. I'm going to go ahead and push on and say you're there or you're going to get there or sooner than later. And then just a quick reminder what I said, the credentials that we're going to use because we do need to write some data. and we didn't want you to have that burden, so we went ahead and set up a bucket that's accessible to everyone. But those resources, those credentials, they'll be a little bit further along, will actually expire pretty darn soon, about a week from now. There's my email address again, and then Devrel, DEVREL at starburst.io. It's a little bit larger group too as well. You're welcome to email either one of those. All right, so now that we're all set up, we have Starburst Galaxy. I would say two important things to think about here. In this control plane UI, because that's what this is really is, a control, like a front end for lots of stuff, two really important things matter here. One of them is a list of catalogs. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just say it real quick. Catalogs is a term that Trino's had for a long, long time, and they really mean an instance of a connector, something that talks to S3, something that talks to Oracle, something like that, something that talks to Elasticsearch. And currently the term catalog today, in no small part due to Apache Iceberg, probably means to a lot of people something like a meta store or a mechanism to store metadata. So there might be a little confusion today as we go along. When I say catalog, I'll try to clarify each time I use the word catalog and make sure. So as catalog, these are a list of connections. And you can see I already have a bunch of these set up. If you just set up Starburst Galaxy, you'll probably have a few like sample TPC, DS, TPCH. You probably don't have all these other ones. I have those because I've set them up. And that's what we're going to have you do here. We're going to say, let's set up a catalog. So this isn't a runtime. This is the compute and storage. This is the storage side. So what are you going to do? You're going to say, hey, create me a new catalog. There you go. A bunch of choices here. And absolutely, this is your account. If you have these other systems, you want to try this out, you have fun. Absolutely. It's all documented. We got tutorials for everything too. But in our world, we're going to, for this lab, we're going to hit Amazon S3. And then if you look back at the lab guide, there you go. We picked Amazon S3. We go ahead and tell you a few things to call it, a name, a description, etc. That's right here, name, description. We're going to ask you to toggle to AWS access key and cut and paste those activities. Now, what I'm going to do, since I went ahead and set it up already, I'm just going to go look at the one I have set up, and I'm scroll to the right. I'm going to hit edit, and I'm going to be in a pre-populated information. So again, call it weblog in actions with a description. Do the access key. Here's the access key and the secret key. They just go right there. The next section is going to say default table format. It's already set up at Iceberg. We're going to leave that alone. And we're going to say Metastore. And here's that thing about Metastore catalog. We're still using the phrase Metastore because it's more than it's where we store the metadata in general for lots of different table formats. So we're going to toggle it. Yours will have a pull down. Pick Starburst Galaxy. Again, this is your environment. You want to try other things, great. But for these labs to work flawlessly, I recommend you do it the way I want you to do it. So pick Starburst Galaxy and then fill in the bucket name, Starburst 101 Hands-On Lab, just like it says. And then look closely. It's going to say, hey, pick a name here. This is where we want you to put some uniqueness because we're all using the same bucket. And if you two people create the same folder, maybe they call it Monica Miller, then we're going to actually have more than one person thinking they control something and the security is all kind of shared across here. So that's going to be a problem. So put your name there or something. I'm going to put LM because that's me. And then I'm going to put 101 because we're doing the 101. I'm going to put today's date, the 29th. Okay, cool. That's what I'll call mine. And when you get all through with all that, there's a big button that says test the connection. Just push that. If all goes well, you're going to get a nice green hooray message. There's mine. There's yours. And if that's done, you're going to hit connect catalog. I'm going to hit save changes just because I think I changed something. All right. So you've pretty much created at least one now. You've added one live real catalog there, a real connection to some data somewhere. And yours is going to, in the current version, especially when you create a catalog from the very beginning, mine was already created, yours is going to throw you into this screen. My screen, you won't see that on mine because I've done this already. And really what I'm going to ask you to do is just leave the permissions, however they're set up. You can read through them. They make sense. They're really just saying, hey, you're the account admin. You have lots of rights. Have fun with it. We can do some more permissioning a little bit later. And then there's also going to be an add to cluster section. So as long as the name is still called free cluster, Whatever cluster comes up, if you just set up over time, sometimes we change that name. I think it's settled on free cluster right now. Add that from the pull down, and then just go ahead and hit that set permission and add it to the cluster. Should get a big old button that says you made it, it's added. And we're going to go ahead and just say, hey, remember what we said? We have some data on S3. And what do we want to do? We want to use a tool we call Schema Discovery to go look at that and build some tables for us, or build a table for us. So hit that Run Discovery button. Now, for me, what I have to do, because I've already set it up, I just have to come to the catalog. So if you have it yourself, come to the catalog and then hit the Schema Discovery page. And I've done some before, but I'm going to go ahead and hit it here. So this is the same thing that you are seeing right here. Run Discovery Schema. What does this want? It wants to know, well, I don't know, where's the data you're talking about? So the data we're talking about looks like that. Ends in login actions, big long name. And likely, if this is your first time set up, there'll be a little bit of a, here, I'll show it to you right here, a little bit of an additional section here that pre-populates this add location privilege, or if it's not checked, check it. You want to do that. That's just giving some additional permissions to the bucket. And then the trick of that is after that is this is where the data is. And this next big chunk is what's schema? So catalogs have schemas. Schemas have objects like tables and views. So what schema do you want to use? We'll just use the name discovered schema to stay consistent, but this would be an opportunity to call anything you want. You can peek in there. There's all kinds of settings. Mine, I'm peeking there purposely because I've run this a few times. So I wanted to do that. You don't have to do what I just did. You just have to say run schema discovery. So that's where we are in the lab guide, schema discoveries. And then we're just telling you open up or check all these things. I'm going to toggle this. It's going to basically say schema discovered schema, and then a table. It's going to use a name that it found from that folder to go, oh, we'll just call the table that. Doesn't know any better at this point. So you want from there, you want to say, yeah, let's create those. So we're checking to create all that. I'll hit create all tables. It's going to say, give me a few seconds here to do this. And really what it's doing, it's reading that in great detail. I'm sorry, it's actually this time building it. It already kind of took a look at it and made some choices. And then it's finished. It's actually run this thing. It says, hey, I actually ran three queries for you. Yours might say 3 or 2 or 4, but probably the same thing. It's going to create a schema. Create schema if it doesn't exist. It's going to point to that location. It's going to create a table. This is the actual table that's created. It has a very exciting name, 0324 login actions. But if you look really closely, did a pretty good job with the names and the data types. Why? Because it was JSON and the names are already in there. Was able to do some good stuff from that. And then it was able to look at all the data and make good choices about these data types, pretty darn close, if nothing else. And then just classic for those that know a lot about data lake tables in general, above the, what does my table look like? It has to answer those 2 other really important questions, which are, where is it? So there's the where. It's over here in this location. And then the what is it? Well, here it's a classical Hive table we're using a file format called JSON. So built this for us. We didn't have to go build that. And you might say that wasn't a whole lot, Lester. Well, it did one more thing too. It said, oh, I need to register those partitions it's found just to come make sure all the information's there. Now, you might say that I could have done that myself. You could have. But if you got 10 tables, 100 tables, if you got 10 tables or 100, but what if each one of those things had not just 5 or 7 columns, but they had 10, 20, 100, 200 columns? This schema discovery can be a really powerful tool to get you started. And the reality is, it may not get it perfectly right. And that's okay, because that's what we do with bronze tiers anyway. We say, let's read the data as received. We shouldn't be cleaning it up yet anyway. All right, so we'll talk about that more as we go along. All right, so we moved along. We saw those things. Just follow my script here. Instead of go off the list, I'll say, what do you want to do? You want to query the text? What do they want us to do? Click on query text to view the query. Yep, we saw those. We finished it. We saw that information. And then from here, it says, let's validate that all this stuff worked. So it's suggesting for us to go to our query editor location here. And it's asking us to go ahead and toggle these things. Hey, let's just make sure we're pointing to, you probably only have one, free cluster. And let's point to the name of that catalog you just created, web login actions, web login actions, and then leaves a schema blank, as you see there. Why? Because we want to run this query right down here. We want to say, hey, look in that discovered schema that we know got created. There should be a table called this. Just make sure it's out there. So we'll do a quick query on that. Just see some sample data that lives in there. And yes, we do. There's those customers from different devices that had failed, they either failed or a Boolean on logged in success, and how many attempts did it take before they either got in or just gave up on those activities. Awesome. That's there. We can also do we can say, show me what we already saw. Show me a create table. This should show you what we saw earlier. Create table. There's those fields. There's the location. Cool. That's good. And in fact, probably, sure. Yep. If they didn't want us to do this, I'll show it to you anyway. You can obviously, or not obviously, just you can open up that web login actions catalog. Again, mine have a lot more than yours purposely. And then there it is, discover schema. You can open that up and see that. You can look at the fields. There's quite a few of the different options in here, including cool things like, generate some SQL based on AI conversations and that kind of fun stuff. We're going to keep it all straightforward writing queries today, but just some of the cool features that are there. All right, let's see what else you got here for us. So good, we are pretty far along. We actually went ahead and created a catalog. We actually ran queries on that, and we didn't talk about this. So I'm going to take a minute and go back and just hit the kind of entry page, the Starburst Galaxy. I mentioned there are two big things to consider for sure. Catalogs of data. So that's data catalogs that we see here. But then there's n number of these, and now we can have n number of clusters. So as an administrator, I can go look at clusters. You may have only one, likely, but you may have 10 or 20. I got just 3 here. These are the list of clusters that we have already kind of created. And you might have remembered when you were saying bind that. Well, no, you wouldn't have. It would have been something different. Sorry. That would have been on the list of things. But if you went and looked at this cluster from an administrative standpoint, there's a couple things going on here. Sure, there's a name. Really important thing is, okay, which of those catalogs do we want to connect here? So this is a many-to-many relationship. Every catalog could be in any number of used by any number of clusters. Any number of clusters could use a single catalog, vice versa. Goes all the way around. Where is it running, and so on. There are some additional features here that we're not going to go in great detail. We have webinars about all these, but we do today have notions we call execution modes. So we're going to use the standard mainly because the free option only allows you standard, but there are some others. There are 2 others. One of them is really geared toward making even a more fault-tolerant environment. This is generally speaking if you dedicate the cluster to maybe ETL workloads and stuff. And then we have one called accelerated. So this is some proprietary stuff here, some autonomous index and caching, where we make things just go faster and faster and faster by watching the queries you run and look for ways to make them quicker, faster, better. I'm going to leave it as standard. If you look here, you got some cool features like turn on, off, auto scaling. There we go. One cluster that has 8 nodes and could go up to 14, and you decide on the fly how to handle this, or even settings that can control what matters. But generally speaking, hey, we're just going to watch for levels of inactivity. I'm going to leave this again at free. How do I do that? One quick, easy way: drag everything to 1-to-1 and turn off auto scaling and put that back on 1. There it goes, back to free. The labs that we run here, you can run them for free. I think it might tell us, I'll go back and peek. It might tell us to go ahead and make it a little bigger. You can. Just realize that if you're using our free trial thing, it's not a trial. You always have this account. I have Lester. I've had it for a couple of years now. Doesn't matter. There's no charge if you use free. But when you start getting beyond free, we have a limited number of credits. We gave you quite a few. But those will expire at some point. So then if you don't want to burn those right now, you can do everything on free. And then we might tell you to go ahead and set this to 5 minutes. Monica, I think, said to do that, but she's on the call. So I'm going to say, I don't know. I'd leave it at 10 or 15 minutes or something. I got mine set to an hour. That's just when is it unbusy? Do you want it to quiesce, close down, save resources, so on and so forth. All right. So that is the notion of a cluster. And I'm going to look back up here and see what I missed. Clusters, yep. Edit a cluster, absolutely. There's a list of those catalogs. We talked a little bit about scaling up and down, talked about auto uptime, a little bit of information on those execution modes, including links to docs and everything to show you there. Again, lots of information. There's so many things that we're covering. I'm sorry, there are so many things that are on the edge of what we're covering that I'm just throwing nuggets. Why? Because if on the ones that pique your interest, I want you to email me back. I want you to put some comments in the chat so Monica can give you some links while you're here right now. I want you to email me later or whatever, and I want to help you find information and get you going. That's my whole job here. I'm here to help you guys, help you learn about what we can do with you and help you through your struggles and all that kind of good stuff. So glad to do that. It is my chosen job. It's not a responsibility I don't want. So you're welcome to send me an email. All right. So let's get on. Let's get back to it. Let me toggle back to my query editor just to get me rooted back where I was, and just going to reiterate that medallion architecture that you might have heard from many vendors leveraging those terminologies. I like some other words, but these are the words that industry seems to like. I like things like raw and structure and consume, but I think that confuses people. And I think most of us are like, hey, let's just say these terms. They make some sense to most people. So we actually have already built a bronze layer. We built a schema with a table in it because we're only focusing on that one data set right now, right? One data set and a couple lookup tables. Obviously, your bronze layer is going to have a lot more information. Then you have multiple domains, all that good stuff. But the goal there is not to change that data. Okay, then we're going to build an enriched, validated, standardized, cleansed layer. That is all the records, not a roll up, all the fine grain detail that are the basis of everything else we do, all basis of all of our additional reporting, analysis, and so on and so forth. And then this notion of a gold layer is really about making it simpler and making it, if possible, faster. People have questions that we could answer by querying the silver layer, but the reality is we could probably make it simpler for them by simply packaging up these complicated queries and maybe calling them a view or materialize a table itself or something like that. And often those could be aggregates as well, not just fine grain details, just roll-ups and that kind of stuff. All right, that said, we're going to move on. We're going to build out our silver and gold, and there's some little caveats. If you look in here, it kind of says, this notion, because Trino can see not just the data lake, can see everything else, there may be other data that it also fits into bronze and silver and maybe even gold. There might be, maybe you're doing most of your work here, but you have a few Teradata views that, nobody's planning on touching those. Maybe they're part of your logical gold layer too. But in our case, we'll talk about those lookup tables. We have some customer and customer profile data that's already in great shape. So it's part of our silver layer, just not moved in the data lake because we decided the way we're leveraging it. It's perfectly fine not to make a copy. We can use it when we need it and move on. All right. So the notes tell us, let's go create a schema. Meaning what? Meaning let's go over here and say, hey, create me a schema. And this one you have a little more flexibility. Call it what you want, just your name. It can be exactly what you ran earlier for that folder. It's okay. It can be whatever you want. And there won't be any collisions here because these are going to be creating a subfolder under that one that earlier we said when you set up the catalog, be very mindful that we need that to be unique across, a couple hundred of us, not necessarily unique for the world, but definitely pretty darn unique anytime soon. So we're going to create a schema. And if I created one called Lester Martin, and if I toggle the web login actions open closed one more time, I should see a new schema showing up. There it is, Lester Martin. Now, Lester Martin's not the right name, but it's the name we're going to use, and it's going to house my silver and my gold layer. Likely, you're going to have those separated. Likely, could be. It's up to you. These are conventions, etc. We're trying to keep it simple, put it in one place, and we really just have one bronze table. So we're going to build at least a silver table and at least a gold something, a gold object, a gold table, a gold view, something beyond that. All right, so we created a schema. That's all we wanted to do there. And then it says, hey, why don't you go ahead and just, toggle down and set this. This is the equivalent of a use command. So you can just say, hey, talk about these objects and not reference the catalog and the schema, all those 3-part naming conventions that make Trino pretty unique. because it can talk to lots and lots of systems. All right, so build that silver layer. Now, I'll go ahead and show you that it says, hey, why don't we go create this table? Let's create and then we can talk about it. So create a table, run this. It says, hey, my table is called login actions silver. Would you put the word silver in your silver tables? Probably not. We're putting them in one location, just trying to make it point very obvious. So there we go, locations, action, silver. And if you look a little harder, you might notice that, well, did we define that table? We did not. Did we define the columns? We did not. We said use the columns and everything that already exist in the bronze. We did a create table as select, often referred to as a CTAS, CTAS. And really what we did, we just did one big important thing. We said, you know what? Even if your data is in perfect shape in the raw layer or the bronze layer, you do want to do very likely one important transformation. You want to do a technical transformation. You want to put it in a high performance, high scalability format. So in this case, we're choosing Apache Iceberg. We're using Apache Parquet as the underlying file format. So table format and file format. And absolutely want to continue with the partitioning strategy that was already there. If this was more work was needed, likely what we would do is define that table a little more details and then do some work to clean that up. But what we're going to show is it isn't perfect for us yet. So we're going to say we're kind of experimenting. We're building this silver layer in an experimental way. We'll operationalize it a little bit later. So we said, fine. Is there a silver table that's got some records in it? Yeah, there is. It looks like the exact same data you saw a minute ago. There we go. You could even do the show create table as. Why not? This will just look, this will have all the columns in it, of course, because, it got them from that other select statement. Whatever it returned back, it decided those were the table definitions. So nothing too crazy there. And this might be a good time to take a moment. I said, what is this whole table format concept about? And the concept is in data lakes, as I said on the create table, you have to know three important things. It's, the world of three lives in these big data and data lake things on almost everything. So one is you have to know the schema. What is the name of the table, the name of the columns, data types, any kind of partitioning or bucketing, that kind of stuff. And then you need to know two more important things. Where is the data at? Generally speaking, like a folder on a repository somewhere. S3 bucket is a good example, HDFS, something. And then what will I expect when I get there? So those have to work. And historically, what they do is all that information lives in a thing called the metastore. Back in the early days, we called it the Hive Metastore, or HMS, Hive Metastore Service. It's just a piece of software that's backed by a table, a database, that information is stored within it. And these modern table formats, an important thing they did is they realized that metastore itself, especially if it's backed by a relational system and has to store massive amounts of information, could be a bottleneck over time and scale. So they simply said, and I'll just talk about Iceberg here in particular, they said, you know what if I moved all that metadata and just put it in files? In our case, JSONs, Avros, JSONs and Avros. Yeah, JSONs and Avros. What if I put all that metadata in metadata files? And what if I put them on the data lake alongside the actual data files themselves? So what you're seeing all in this blue markup, it simply says, wherever your table location is, there's going to be a metadata folder with metadata files, and there's going to be a data folder with, imagine that, data files. And then what Apache Iceberg wants to do is simply say, hey, let's use, and this is where that word catalog I told you can be confusing. Let's use a meta store to store what? The most current version of the file that says this version is the current state, a current version. This snapshot is the term they use for versions. So the most recent snapshot. Now, we could spend a lot more time on that. I teach that pretty regularly in great detail. We are not going to go in that great detail. I gave you a link to the Iceberg spec. I gave you a little information here. I love to talk a bit about this stuff. I love it. We got lots of places to ask these questions. I've got a Slack channel. We got this beautiful thing called our community. If you go to Starburst.io and just simply say, hey, show me some resources. Oops, I should have went straight to it. There's a forum here. Ask some questions. I'm looking at this all the time. Going to help you out with it. All right. So key points: the data and the metadata live together in the data lake itself, or your repository, wherever you store your data. Metadata goes along with it. All right. I spent longer on that than I wanted because I really didn't explain it, but I want to make that point. That's the fundamental difference, and that difference creates lots of functionality that we could, again, been lots of bunny trails discussing. We're going to keep it simple now and focus on some of the benefits of that conversation. One of those benefits is absolutely insert, updates, deletes, merge statements, all those cool things. And not just only do they work with a transactional boundary, a single statement transaction, where if I run that, I'll create a new version with atomic, consistent, isolated, and durable, those acid checks that you might be remembering from your database 101 kind of conversation wherever that day happened for you. If it hasn't happened in the past, good one to look up, the acid test. All right. So that said, what we determine, if we look back at our silver table, let me run the query on it again, you might notice that the first column is called cust key, and the rest of the columns seem to have an underbar in there. So in our world, remember, one of the features we're trying to do in a silver layer is make sure we adapt to naming conventions, data types, all that good stuff. So simply we said, you know what, cust key ought to be cust underbar key. Now, I'm going to do that live for a couple reasons. Well, there it is. I'm going to say, let's just alter the table, switch that up a little bit. I'll verify when it runs that it actually works to make sure. So that's nothing magical you might think. Whoops, I meant to say run this. Give me a couple records. Nothing magical, but that actually created another version. Versions are not only when data changes, they're when anything changes. So even if the schema itself changes in some way. That was one of those things we will likely operationalize as we move data, we build a place, that kind of stuff. So we're just showing how interactively you might see all these things. Why? It's going to actually do some nice things for us by creating some details under the covers. So we'll see some of those in a second. One other thing I could have shown you a moment ago is this metadata, while it lives out there in the data lake, it's not the easiest stuff to read. That picture you saw earlier with all those manifest lists and all that stuff, they're in Avro and they're packed up really crazy. And then even when you look at them in a humanly readable JSON format, they take a little time to work on reading. What the nice thing is that there's this notion of metadata tables. So things like, show me that silver table, but tell me details about the current partitions. Here they are. These are the 5 partitions exist. How many files are each one? Give me, some details, some metadata about what lives in each one of those partitions. So these are just some cool stuff. Some other cool stuff, though, is that, remember what I said, when we build something, we actually change snapshots and all that kind of cool stuff. So there's that current snapshot. We set up, we created it, we're off and running. I'm going to come back and see those a little bit more as I go on. I guess it wanted to suggest this. Every snapshot is going to have a high-level summary. And if you look really close, there's a lot in here, but it's going to say things like, hey, you added 13,000 records. If you remember when we did the create table, you look down the corner, it actually showed 1,300. I didn't point it out, but I probably should have. And there's a lot of other information, but I'll just point at that one particular thing. Created about 5 files, created about 1,300 records across the span there. All right, what else can happen in here? Well, you can do operations like DML, data manipulation language. You can do delete. So basically, our business told us, you know what? In our silver layer, anything, we're doing a fraud system here. So anything that was a good login, and they did it within 2 login attempts, we don't even want it. Now, one might argue, is this a good idea or not? I, as a data engineer, I might argue with my business person, do we really want to lose that? And they might say, yep, absolutely, I have no value in that. And absolutely, I would agree with them if this is going to trim my silver layer down dramatically. Maybe in this case, probably most of the attempts are good, shrinks it down. And again, we're just having a conceptual conversation here. It all depends what you want to do. But these are the things you would do in that pipeline. and the questions you probably would ask. And I would simply say that in this scenario, this team said 100%. That's right. Delete all those. And it took 4,300 records out of 13,000. So that's a pretty good chunk, especially at size and scale. But if they come back another time in the future and realize, you know what, even the good login attempts that happen pretty fast, they might want to start looking for, well, did that same person do 15 of these in an hour and that kind of stuff? There might be other fraud that they want to bring it in, and you're okay because you still got it in your raw. You still have all your historical bronze raw data. You can come back and augment, bring that data forward. So listen to your business, but also challenge them. But save money. It's all. What are we trying to do? Kind of activity, and it is okay. It is okay in that silver layer to not just project, make things less columns or add columns and all that good stuff. It's okay to get rid of some records in the silver layer. Don't get rid of your raw records, because then when these decisions are hard to, or if not, or possibly impossible to happen. All right, so I deleted 4,300. What is that going to tell me? Well, it's going to tell me, if I look at my snapshots, that I've got a new one. I built one. So this is the first snapshot, and then I built another one. It was a delete operation. I look at the summary. It said right there, look, hey, basically you deleted 4,330 records in there. Okay, that makes sense. There's a lot more stuff, but again, talk to me. We got some training, goes deeper and deeper and deeper. Plenty of stuff on the web too. That's all free. All right, so we deleted those. We verified, yep, there's a snapshot. And if you kind of look, I didn't point it out on the screen itself, but in the screenshot, you see this notion of, hey, I'm related to, I came from that one. They're keeping this lineage, this history, not just it's a new snapshot, but where did it come from? Where did that one come from? And so on, so on and so forth. All right, the business people decided a few other things. They decided, hey, I noticed there are some IP addresses that are null. I don't like that. I would mark it a -1. I would say that was silly, because now they made a scenario and it affected 1,029. They made a scenario where we're using smart nulls, which are not always my favorite either, but okay, cool. They did that. And in fact, that created, if I run the snapshots, that will create yet another version of that, another snapshot. This one down here, we did some overwrites. I'll click on the summary just for giggles. And you remember what I said, 10,029. Now the words might be confusing to you. It didn't say that it updated 10,029. It actually said it did a delete of 10,029. It did an add of 10,029. I'll just go ahead and simply say, if you're interested in what's really happened there, more in the spec, etc. But this is a concept that we would call a merge on read strategy. So what the system really did, it made positional deletes, and then it added the records back completely. Longer story, but just for those that have kind of heard some of that or thinking about that. So merge on read instead of a alternative strategy, go copy on write. Worth all looking at. They're all based on the fact that these files are immutable. So we really can't do in-place updates on the files. And they are going to drive forward to what we talked about at the very top, that there are going to be some maintenance activities we have to do to kind of shore this system up over time. Okay. All right. So we deleted, we renamed the nulls to -1. We verified there's nothing null. We verified, created yet another snapshot. And then all these snapshots has two really important features. One of those features is called time travel. We can run a query. So we can run a query like this. We can say, hey, show me everything from login action silver, where customer key is this particular thing. So I guess they want us to run this one first. So let's say, hey, show me everything for this customer key. It's about 6 records. This record actually had 2 of those gotchas, right? Oh, they were null. We turned to -1. Now this simply says, well, I want to see what that data looked like back, at a certain point in time. So we can do this concept called time travel by saying for version, and when we do that, we need an important thing. We need to know those version numbers. In this case, I really want to see it right here when I did the delete. So I'm going to grab this number here, and then instructions. If you're doing this yourself or now or later, they kind of walk through all exactly how to set that number. So I'm going to say, show me those records, those same 6 records, but one version back. And we don't have that option. We can't say, one version back, two version back. We have to say a specific version, or we can use a time window. Show me as of an hour ago, a minute ago, 2 days ago. So there is that notion if we don't care so much about the exact version number, we just care about a window of time. And there we go. If we look backwards in time, we see what the table looked like a few moments ago, right? Yep, they were null. And the realization was our business finally listened to Lester and said, I see your point, Lester. Null is null and -1 is -1. And maybe all that was a smart null. Can we backtrack? Can we go back to where we were a few minutes ago? And I say, we can. They say, why don't we do it by doing an update? Why don't we update everything that's -1 and set it to null? And I would say, well, don't do that because there might have been things that were already -1. And maybe you want to leave those alone. So good point. And I could figure that out regression with the time travel, or I can just simply say, let me just roll back to that point in time. So there we go. We have a roll back to snapshot command, right? You roll back to snapshot, my schema, my table, and I need to use the version I want to roll back to. Now this one, we don't get to roll back to a point in time. We do need to roll back to a specific version should you're interested in that kind of fun stuff. And that's okay. This gets pretty, probably we don't want the average business analyst to be able to do this. We want this to be a very controlled environment. And if I did that now, if I just say, hey, run the same silver table, and what does it look like now? Current version says, hey, null. There's the two nulls. I didn't do a sort by. That's why they're in little different places there. Cool. So we get versions anytime the schema or the data changes. We can do time travel based on those version numbers or snapshot numbers as they're technically called. We can do them on time windows. I didn't do that, but that's something you can definitely do. And business people probably will do that more than on the version numbers, even though they can find these version numbers as they like. And then we did an actual rollback to that point in time. Now, I'm going to not go down this path too hard, but I'll go and tell you a couple other things. There's branching. There's lots of ways to create very elaborate, messy, scary things. I blog a lot about this on my lestermartin.blog. You're welcome to take a peek there. If I had time, I'd put a couple posts on the record there, but reach out to me directly if you're interested in those, or just go to lestermartin.blog. There's a search or tag, look for Iceberg. A lot of good blog posts on what's happening here, for those that want to see the science fair experiments. All right, so we rolled them all back. We're fine, and then we want to make the point that what's happening here. So I'm going to run this one called another one of those metadata table files. This one's about, hey, for this table, show me not every file that is out there on the data lake, but all the files that are part of the current version. So he actually says, I got 10 of these. And why 10? Well, it's another conversation for a moment in time, but there's 10 of these. And if I look really close, a couple things. One thing we think about in the maintenance world is this notion, it's a universal concern always. It's always been 15 plus years, this notion of small files. These systems over time are not going to do great if all we have is millions and millions of teeny tiny files. These are really tiny files. What are they, 2K? Oh, that's record count, sorry. File size. There's one at 42K, another one at 42K, some at 29K. There's a bunch of files, and there's some tiny, tiny files. So basically what I'm really trying to say is there's this concept called optimize, sometimes called vacuum. Technically or logically, I would call it a compaction. Hey, we're asking Trino, and other engines can do this too. Spark to do this. Other systems can say, cool, let me compact that table. It's already done. And really, we can just say optimize and let it run, off the defaults. This one, I went ahead and said, hey, if there's anything less than about 30K, let's make those good targets for compaction. So I'm going to run this again. And the good news is I'm down to only 5 files, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 files. They're still really, really small because compaction is doing a couple things. It's taking those weird positional deletes and replacements and all that, and it's just basically, when it actually rebuilds good result sets as well and gets rid of those query. Wow. First brain moment in this whole conversation here. An hour in, I deserve a moment. I had my moment. It's gonna take care of much of those problems that come up with the notion of a merge on read, meaning, hey, all these kind of what if scenarios have been rebuilt. We're rebuilding the files, and we're going to try to build a little bit smaller. Now, one could argue this data is the problem is the data is really small. You saw how many records, a couple 13,000 or 10,000, nothing too big to look at here. But what we did do is we said, hey, current version needs 5 files, not 10. Sometimes this is really about how big your cluster is, how about big your data is. You're going to find the right sweet spot when this makes some sense. And to be fair, it's twofold. It's, hey, every table's different, and we need to find the right answer. And then there's the, most tables will be fine if we do it periodically. And then when does that matter? Well, it matters when size and scale and amount of velocity of change and that kind of stuff. What am I saying? Long story short? Long story short says there's probably a few tables that are gigantic, and there are probably a lot of tables that are relatively, not so gigantic. So the ones that are not so gigantic, pick a strategy like, I don't know, once a day, once a week. So maybe once a week you do these maintenance activities. And the really gigantic ones, it depends. And I'm going to talk about that. So the good news is that's one of those things. I think my notes are going to go ahead and tell you there's a few others. I think Monica looked over there, gave you some links to that. There are some other activities that need to occur periodically. They're called expire snapshots. They're called removing orphan files. Again, longer conversation. She gave you some links there in the chat that you're welcome to take a look at. I'm always glad to talk about this stuff. It really makes. I've spent a large amount of my time, work time, not personal time, learning about this stuff, and I like to share it. The average person probably doesn't care too much. These are the maintenance activities. All right, good stuff. Now that I'm here, it'd be good to take a minute and say, how do you do these maintenance activities? You absolutely can do what we're doing now. We're experimenting. We're finding the right answer. Very realistic, very valid answers as a data engineer, building a data pipeline. It would not be very hard at all to enrich that pipeline to include these maintenance activities at the point in time we know they're useful and beneficial. And in fact, I think that's very smart, especially for the size and scale tables that really have a lot of dependencies and intricacies and that good stuff. But like I said, there's going to be a lot of tables that, what, I don't want to do all that stuff, Lester. Can I just automate this stuff? You can. At least in Starburst Galaxy, you can. Not in open source Trino, that we didn't support that stuff. So I'm going to show you where you find that. You go over here under catalog. Whoops. Data, catalogs. You find your catalog. In this case, web login actions. You go find that table. So I'm going to focus on login actions silver. And in here, there's a nice little button called quality. And quality has all kinds of good checks and profiles and really neat stuff. Again, more and more features. I'd love to show you, but not going to get into it. And I'm not really trying to show you this, but I want to tell you, here's where it is. And there's all documented. It's all in the notes there. Hit that magic button. Guess what? It's going to say, hey, I can take care of these maintenance activities. Kind of tell me what role and what cluster, because you might want to put this activity on a separate cluster possibly, but I'm just going to use free cluster. And then you just kind of turn on the things you want. Obviously, turn them all on. And here's where basically you're just kind of saying, hey, tell me, what, we don't give you a whole lot of switches here, because if you do them by hand, you have lots of options. We're going to say, hey, we know what the good chances are. And the only one we really care about is how far back should we look at before we start getting rid of your snapshot. So we're going to pick, we're going to offer days. You can do it based on numbers. If you do it all by hand, we're going to say, hey, look, what do you want? We're going to default to something like 7 days. And then you're going to come down here and just pick a schedule, select the frequency, blah, blah, blah. We're going to build a cron expression. So if you have a really complicated cron expression, you know how to write them, just do them yourself. I'm going to hit cancel this because I don't want to enable this, but absolutely, that is a quick way to do this. Now, I'll let Monica if she disagrees with this, but I do believe our free trial that seems to be over. But during the summer last year, we had a free trial of like 90 days. We'll do all this for you for free. It doesn't cost anything to set us up, but it does cause resources to run. And there is some, arguably costs associated with that. I don't believe we have the free trial going anymore. So Monica, if you know for sure, and you have a link that goes there, because I couldn't find one. Otherwise, know that that feature is available to you, please take a minute and just kind of click on that link and read through it. I think it still might even require you to say, hey, support, can you turn on? It still might technically be in what we call private preview, but that's where it'll be. It's pretty darn useful and interesting. Okay, so we got a bronze layer. We got a good solid business layer. And again, remember what we're going to do? We'll probably do all that as part of a pipeline instead of just every single time try these things. We'll just fix it all in one big run. And chances are, if that's all we had to do, that means we did a lot of testing and we trust that the data is in great shape. Most of the time, there's a lot of experimenting to find out what you need to do, and that transformation might be more than change the name of one of the fields and delete some records that meet a criteria. Sometimes it gets a lot bigger. Again, I got plenty of good examples. You're going to reach out to me. We can talk about that. All right, so our gold layer. Our gold layer says, we get back to my creator. So folks, we let our subject matter experts play with that table for a little while, and they decided that this query that is joining that silver layer of the login attempts with that, as you see, line 95 and 96 with our burst bank customer and customer profile tables gives us something like this. They start to go, you know what? This information right here solves a lot of is our basis of a lot of our analysis going forward. We said, cool. Well, there's a join across three tables, two of them in another database over there in Postgres or something. And we're going, you know what? That's cool. And our system absolutely can do that. But depending about frequency and that kind of stuff, we have to make choices. Does it make sense to bring some of that data forward? Does it make sense to make a view or a materialized view? We could build a view on top of that so it looks like a table and it always runs it. But in our situation, we decided, hey, you know what? Let's just build, because we know how often we're updating this data. Maybe we're just getting those web logins once a day right now. Maybe that's just best we can do. So here's a scenario. Likely you might have made a materialized view. Might have started out as just a view. In this case, we just materialized a flat on table. We called it login actions gold. And guess what? It was that create table as thing we talked about. And we let the create table, we didn't supply all that fun stuff like what kind of table is and all that. If you remember when we set this catalog up, we said default it to an iceberg. So it's an iceberg table. In fact, we probably can just say that question. Let me see if I can see it over here. I'll just say, hey, show me a select describes show create table. I don't know if I was in my notes said to do that, but I'll show it to you. There you go. It's still it just says Parquet. There it goes. Type iceberg. Word to decide to put all that good stuff. But those table fields are the results from that three table join earlier. So this is a materialized table. It's not a view. But what's nice about it is people have a table called login actions gold, the gold version of login actions that's enriched. So it's actually got rid of some columns and absolutely joined and added some additional columns there. Again, we're keeping this pretty darn simple. Did I do the create table? Yeah, I did the select and I did the create table. It is. So I just verified the select. I built a table to house it, all that good stuff. And then we're letting our folks go nuts and query that thing like crazy. We just queried, I don't know if we ever ran a query on it. I guess so. Yeah, we did. Oops. What am I missing? There it is, gold. Show me the gold. All right, so they have that. They can run on our query tool, use whatever tool they want here now. They might take Tableau and connect up to that schema, go against that table, and everybody's happy. And it's a basis. So far, the good news is, especially with Trino, the additional things I want to start to show you now are above and beyond just basic Trino. Some things that Starburst brings, or things that Trino has with some other options as well, should you want to do. But let's push on a little bit here. We got our bronze, silver, and gold. All right, I'm going to take a sip of my iced coffee. I did the two-handed hold. That was interesting. And I'm going to transition to the last two steps of your data products, security, governance, that kind of good stuff. Okay. Yes. All right. So what's a data product? Great video that's worth watching from our field CTO out there, guy named Adrian, that describes data products kind of like going into the pharmacy, knowing you have a headache, finding the aisle that says headache medicine, finding lots of cool boxes and reading the labels and looking at the colorful pictures and going, oh, that's the one I need. And then buying it and then, and then consuming it, open it up, getting the pills and taking it. So data products are the box, the aisle location, all that kind of cool stuff. So they, in many ways, you could argue they are the marketing of, the pitching, the selling, or selling, or maybe just simply the curation, the curated data sets that we want people to see and taste and whatever. So we do have in our GUI a section called data products. Now, right now, I have two data products, one called the Fred data product, one called some aviation stuff. Okay, that's cool. We're going to build another one of these data products. So let's just kind of do it as we go here. I'm going to go back to data, and I'm going to look at my catalog that I have. And we have a way to promote an existing schema ultimately to a data product. So meaning likely you're going to curate a schema as a data engineer or data producer. You don't have to be a data engineer, you can be a data analyst, build this schema, put the tables of views, et cetera, you want in there, and then say, hey, let me just raise this up so it can be surfaced kind of in that store kind of view, that marketing page, the sales pitchy kind of information. So I'm going to do a little bit of that stuff. So why not go ahead and mention that we got this universal search that I haven't seen once. And Monica, you do a great job of showing this off. I sometimes just don't really go there, which is terrible. So, hey, web login, actions, cool. There's a lot of other results, but this is the one I'm looking for. Hey, yeah, it's a bucket, it's a schema. Let's go there. It's a catalog, not a bucket or a schema. It's a catalog. All right, I found this thing. Great. Really, what I want to do is say, hey, could I? And I'm gonna look at Lester Martin as this. I know this system pretty well, and I'm gonna look at all this. I'm gonna say, hey, you know what? While I'm here, can I go ahead and enhance this with some additional details as I go? Absolutely. Let's go ahead and pick this up. We want to say, hey, let's call this schema. Excuse me. This schema, Lester Martin schema. We'll call it, hey, it's a suspicion of fraudulent activities. What else could we talk about here? You might say, hey, if someone was looking at this information, this is stuff they can find in the catalog. Let's say, well, there we go. Let's assign me as the point of contact. Let's add a link called frauds and scams. I think that's enough. Yeah. So let's just provide some additional metadata around what this thing is. So that didn't add a whole lot. Contacts, info, description, that kind of good stuff. What else do I want to decorate this thing with? I think your name. Yep. All right. At this point, I might say, hey, this schema, web logins, Lester Martin, this whole schema that has these two tables, I want to raise this up as one of those formal things, a data product. So I'll just hit a beautiful button. And there are other ways to create a data product. This is the way I'm going to use. It's a simple wizard. It's going to say, hey, bring forward those kinds of things, those ones I just added. It's going to bring all the other stuff too, all the data. I didn't even show you the cool lineage. I'm going to show you that in a minute before I forget. And it's going to say, name this data product. I'm going to call it something like Fin Crimes, Financial Crimes 0304. It brought forward because I told it. Bring the summary. I can change that if I want. Sure. I'm going to leave it alone. We can also, I guess I thought we had some notes there. I would just say that you can also provide some much more elaborate information. Now, this can be used in Markdown and that kind of stuff. So if you're familiar how to use Markdown, you can do that. You can do a preview. I'm just going to put some words there. You can say, hey, I need a default cluster. What is this about? When someone sees this product, they want to go immediately and start querying it. It gives them an opportunity to go straight to the query editor. It also supports a thing we call preview. It has a place to run that thing and leverage it. We can add and remove more links. We can change more contacts, but looks pretty good. We'll just promote it. And then guess what? This magically showed up on this marketplace of data products, the Fin Crimes. I'll put my hat back on from my sales pitch hat and say, this is a way to say, maybe today we drop people into this and go, wow, that's a lot of stuff. What do I need? That's technically still valid. But what we might want to do is simply say, hey, you're learning about the data that's out there. You're curious? Go to the data products and drill into Fin Crime, see what this is all about, who's involved, and other cool activities here. And more appropriately, go look at what's in there. Go look at those data sets. show me a quick preview of what we're talking about. Show me the data that is in that data set. So we start thinking of a data product has data sets. Makes sense? And again, well, not again, let me just say it. That data product is going to link to, is going to be pegged on a schema. The data sets that live in that data product are those views and tables, the objects that exist in there. We'll actually let you see them all by different definitions. You can see, break them down, look inside, any kind of descriptions that are there. You can add tags all over the place. Lots of really interesting, cool things. You can go straight and just start querying it, hitting these buttons at any point in time. And then another cool thing I like about this, not just is there some high level stuff here, we have this beautiful tab. It's my favorite one called Add Usage Examples. And here's where you might say, yeah, that table, the gold one that we created might be the thing, but there still might be 50 other queries that run against that, 50 very popular queries. Here's an opportunity to show one of those queries, call it something, and say, hey, run this query when you're trying to find people that find this kind of characteristic or that. So you end up basically building your own wiki page of sorts here. And if there's still more places to put stuff, absolutely go back to the overview and add more links and stuff. So if you have an internal wiki or you have a Teams page or whatever, add those activities so it's all part of supporting information. Cool, wild stuff. Add a thing to say, if you have a trigger or link that says, go to my authentication system and add me to a person that can read this, maybe you put that there. And why am I saying all that? Because let me see if I can, I'm talking more about this probably than I should for the moment. The data products, if done well, then we probably can open up access to these data products as a go to the store and look down the aisles and see what's available. Remember, that's different than actually querying the data or even the preview. So at the store, if I pick something that I have to be over the age of 21 because of the drugs or something, I still have to go up there. The pharmacist still has to check my ID and that kind of stuff. So pitch and sell and offer up all these cool curated data products with appropriate data sets in there, and realize might be a way, that's what we're intended to do, create a marketplace for folks to go find stuff maybe they don't know about yet, instead of having to call everybody and look around. So you as a data producer might say, yeah, I have a control group that can actually query this, but I offer up to either everyone or even other groups and roles that say, hey, yeah, you can find out about this stuff. So think of it as a discovery feature, because when you're in there, the truth is, once you want to query it, guess what? We're going to take you back to the query editor. Why? Because I said a minute ago, this is still a schema that lives in a catalog that has things. In fact, what we're doing here is, if you look really closely, we're visualizing that and saying, hey, this is really a schema called Lester Martin, but because of that icon, it tells me, oh, there's a data product wrapper around it as well. So any tool that really, really wants to connect, they're still going to, connect that way they used to do, and all that kind of good stuff. Okay, cool. Enough on data products. Other people sell it better than myself, so apologies for that. What are some other cool things? I look at the time, I got about 1:20. I have a few more things to try to cover before we hang up. So, Monica, if there are any critical questions, absolutely let me know. Now I'll try to give a high level of tagging, of security, and absolutely while I'm here, I want to show that cool lineage that I keep forgetting to show. All right, so I'm going to go look back at the catalog, because that is the richer view. And I'm going to drill back down into that same table we've been talking about, that gold table. All right, here. And you could use whichever way you want to get here. I'm going to use this way. I could drill inside of here. There's a lot of tabs here. They all have something cool to do. Don't have time to go through them all, but I'm going to hit lineage. Why? Because lineage, I think there's a full screen here, right? Is it that one? Yeah, full screen. We can simply say, what is this thing? It's the login actions. Cool, great. What created that? Oh, hey, this statement right here, this statement was run by Lester back at this point in time, took this long, all kinds of neat stuff. What is it made of? Well, I could read that, it'll tell me, but visually, it was pulling information from those two customer and customer profile tables, pulled information from Silver, cool. And you can kind of walk this notion up or down. We can say, is there anything after this? Nope. There's nothing plus. If I hit the plus over here, is there anything before this? Yep. This actually came from our login actions. Again, we can look at those individual transforms or activities or whatever happened to create that stuff. And if we rebuild some of these things, maybe we went back and rebuilt something, that lineage is actually going to also show the fact that multiple times things have happened. So we can compare what was it an hour ago when you did it, or 2 weeks ago, and that kind of good stuff. So lots of cool stuff. Pretty proud of this. I know we don't have time to kind of beat it up, but pretty darn cool stuff. And it's not unique to our world. Several other tools have this kind of visual lineage. We go down to the column level lineage details too, which is pretty cool. Again, no time to kind of go into great detail. What else do we want to show? We want to show that we have a notion called tagging. Tagging is pretty straightforward concepts. I want to create a tag. I want to call it SSN, Social Security number. Tags can be created at that just a top level, but we do support this notion of one level deep nesting. So I already created one called PII. So now I have a PII SSN. I have a PII phone number I previously created. JDD, and other this, that, and the other tags. Okay, these are just tags. What could we do with tags? Generally speaking, what we're going to do is go to these catalogs and start leveraging those tags, applying those tags to various levels at the catalog, at the schema, at a table, at a column. So let's just talk about columns here. So we'll look at our gold one more time and say, hey, do we have a table called gold and has columns like this, that, and the other? Yep, sure does. There's one called phone. There we go. Let's apply that PII phone number right there to it. Great. And why would we do stuff like that? We're going to do that kind of stuff because we want to have access rules that are, we want to support a system that does role-based access as well as attribute-based access. So we can do two things. I'm at 21, so I'm just going to show you screenshots. I won't run everything, and say we could easily take advantage of both of those concepts. So over here in under access, I pre-created a role called financial analysts. I put myself in there. I went in and created some privileges. What I don't have right now is the privilege to read the new table stuff that we had. Why? Because I just added it. So let's add a privilege. Let's say it's for data. We'll get all kinds of approaches here. Lots of things we can secure. So I'm going to say, hey, for that particular, I'm going to lock it down to a table. You can go up or down wherever you want to. And I'm just going to give this role right to select that table. Select from table. Great. And that means, and I'm just because it's a few minutes left, I'm going to stop. I can go back and forth and experiment and show you that with this role or without that role, or with this role. I guess I'll show you that part of that just to make the point obvious. Here I am. I'm going to toggle my role to that financial analyst. And as you see, that list got a lot shorter because there weren't too many things. And even in this catalog, the only thing I can see is, Web Actions Gold. I can only run a couple queries. I can run some queries on that. Why? Because I gave myself rights to do that kind of good stuff. Great stuff. And I can't see anything else because that's all I've given myself. Yeah, that's fair. Let me go back to admin though, because I want to say, and this is pretty normal stuff. It's just that we support that ourselves. We have our own RBOC and ABOC authorization layer here. What else could we do though? We could use those tags, and I'll just scroll through and make sure that's the main stuff I'm trying to show you. Yep. And then I'll end it on the screen itself. Yeah. I won't do all these tests. You're welcome to try them all, but I'll just conceptually say, what would you might do next? You might simply say, okay, but in addition to that, by the fact that I'm going to go back to those roles and privileges and say, hey, for these financial analysts, let's go create a policy. It looks like I got one already kind of started. Let me see if I can do it from scratch here. Delete it. You can say, hey, I'm going to build a policy. Now, this policy might be called no PII. Great. No PII. Description. Don't show the PII. Make it forever. Mine's going to be forever. You can set it for time windows and that kind of stuff. This policy is for what scope? It's for the catalog we've been talking about, the web login actions. And then we can just say, hey, in this case, any schema that that this person can see. So for everything that's in there, so every table in every schema and then every table within all those schemas. That's the scope we care about for this policy. You can give me more fine grained than that. And then really what we're trying to do is say things like this. Hey, I'm going to add a privilege. I'm going to deny. Oh, that's not what I want to do. I want to do a column mask. Let me cancel that. I want to do a column mask. I might say, hey, for everything that's there, because you can further tighten this up. You can say, hey, I want to do a column mask. Show the last four numbers. And I really want to create a policy. What am I trying to say? I need oh heck, I should have had that. Monica, I'm having her brain closed, so let me just see where I missed it. Yeah. A policy, yeah. Somewhere in there. I think I missed it. I'm thinking about it for a second. Where is the check? So let me go back in previous. Oh, you want to do something like this. Hashtag. All right, hashtag PII splat dot splat. Hey, everything. This is the middle one. This is the scope for in this family. You see on the top here under web login actions. Anything that I'm finding. So generally speaking, we're likely talking about a table, a column, schema, anything that has that tag called anything under PII. What do I want to do? I want to do right here. I want to say, hey, let's apply a mask so that way when they query it, we can mask it. We can do row filters on this. We can do other additional privileges based on this stuff. And this is this notion of an attribute based policy as well. All right. I think I'm out of time. I do not like when this thing hangs up on me. So I'm going to just simply say, I didn't quite finish and show all that out here, but that's exactly what we're trying to ultimately show at the end of that. And now what I'm going to do is take a pause, take a deep breath, and hit the home page and ask Monica before it hangs up, are there any big questions that you saw or themes that I should try to address right quick while I'm here? Otherwise, I'll do my little sign off here in a moment. Monica. Hey.
How do I back on both of us? Well, let me do that. There we go. Hello.
Hey,
A
good to
lot of
see you.
Good to see you. A lot of great themes, a lot of things that I told people to follow up with you individually. There's a lot of DBT and iceberg questions, which I think is really interesting and fantastic. And then the other theme I saw was data products and access control, both within AWS and how we handle it, and then also just data product sharing in general. So I don't know if you had any general questions on it. I tried to get all the quick answers in the chat. And then, of course, please send us an email, lester.martin@starburstdata.com, which I've pinned in the chat, as well as devrel@starburst.io, starburstdata.io. And then, actually, I don't know. Is it starburst.io or starburstdata.io?
Starburst.io. It'll actually go to both.
Okay, perfect. And then, so that's kind of the things
Yeah,
that
I
I
think
saw.
if those are the themes, sorry, cut you off.
That's it. No, go for it.
Those are the themes I'm interested. The good answers are there, and then the ones that want more to reach out to me. I will say one thing about the data product. So, in our enterprise software, we have clusters. So they might have this cluster and that cluster, and they're kind of unaware of each other. So these data products exist within each cluster. So in the enterprise version of software, install it yourself, there's still some work that's going on to say, how can I make this data product shareable and easily, they're shareable today, but they're not easily shareable. But I was going to say there's work there, but the good news here in Galaxy, because we isolated from clusters and from catalogs, then the data products that we create here are accessible, are linkable, accessible, and surfaceable anywhere. In fact, just looking at the data product, you don't have to run it anywhere. You can go see those. So that's a cooler feature, I think, that we do. But because of the benefit of how we're doing the software as a service solution. Other than that, I think you probably had great answers. I think it's going to hang up on us in about 10 seconds. So I'm going to simply say, Monica, thank you for your help today. And for everyone that attended and for anyone's watching this after the fact, thank you for your time, focus, attention. Happy Trinoing, happy starbursting, happy iceberging. Thank you.
Thanks, Lester.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We're still live. All All right, I'm gonna keep smiling as long as I can until I see. I'll go ahead and I'll stop sharing. That might help it.